officials going into the private sector immediately after they leave office. But if I could just touch on one thing really quickly that I'm even more worried about than Mueller and the DOJ and the weaponization of the FBI and even the CIA, and that is the retired military officers. They're all subject in theory to the Code of Military Justice, which says even after retirement, they cannot disparage the commander-in-chief. It's sort of like the Logan Act, we don't enforce it. But we've never, in our past, we've had, General McClellan in the Civil War, Edmund Walker was critical of Kennedy, Curtis LeMay was. Everybody remembers Douglas MacArthur and Truman. But in all of those cases, it was all considered wrong what the military officers did, both in service and on retirement. This is extraordinary. We've had decorated officers. They're all four-star generals or admirals, and they've almost hinted like a coup. Admiral McRaven said that Trump should leave sooner than later. And General McCaffrey said that he was a Mussolini-like character. And General Hayden tweeted out pictures of Auschwitz when Trump continued the Obama policy of temporarily separating parents from their children when they were undergoing legal hearings at the border. General Mattis also used that image of Hitler when he said that he was using Nazi-like strategies to divide us. Now that is all, that's all in theory rhetoric, but what was even scarier is two very highly decorated lieutenant colonels that were prominent in the Iraq War, Lieutenant Colonel Yushlin, but especially John Nagel, recently wrote a letter to the chairman of the Joint Chiefs saying that they had to take an active participation in monitoring the election and might have to remove Donald Trump. And then we remember General Miley, who said that he's not going to be a photo op and he's not going to get involved with the president when he was going to use federal troops. And then four former chairmen of the Joint Chief, I think it was Dempsey, Mullen, Myers, and Colin Powell, then seconded that. And remember, that was very strange because during the Rodney King riots, it was Colin Powell who left a message for George H.W. Bush saying, whenever you want to use federal troops, just call, I'm ready. So it wasn't a position of principle. And remember, when they did that, Joe Biden said, I've got these guys covering my back and they can come into the White House and remove the president. That seems crazy, but a very prominent lawyer who was active in the DOJ, married to a very highly decorated military officer, Rosa Brooks, 11 days after the president was elected, wrote a very stunning article in Foreign Policy magazine. And here's what she said. How do we move Trump sooner and later? And she gave you three avenues to do it. The first was impeachment, which she sort of said, you don't really have to have high crimes and misdemeanors or treason and briberies as specified in the Constitution. But the problem with that, it takes too long. Or we could invoke the 25th Amendment that he used non compos mentis. And of course, that was very prescient because that served as almost a guide for what would subsequently follow. But the scariest was the third, and that is we could have a military coup. It's not my words, it's hers. And she outlined scenarios in which military officers, patriotic to the Constitution, as she said, would not follow presidential order, but would caucus together and then remove him from office. So what I'm getting at is when you have people of that stature and reputation, they're normalizing something that's treasonous and dangerous to the Constitution. And that had always been the fantasies, the sort of the 7 days in May accusations of the left. They were always critical of the military industrial complex. But the fact of the matter is that the military industrial complex is now very sympathetic to the left, and they've adopted it as a method to short circuit constitutional processes. And I think it's very dangerous. And all those former generals should have apologized. Somebody said to me recently, well, there was only about 30 of them, but the problem was they were the 30 most influential. And even though they were in retirement, a lot of their colleagues were not in retirement, and they served on military defense contractors. They're on the boards of big corporations like General Dynamics that are having contracts. And the final thing I'll say is that the right has been very sympathetic to the military in warding off defense from the left. But I would urge my conservative friends to say, you know what, that should end. And from now on, we should have a moratorium on retiring generals serving on defense boards that have business with the Pentagon, maybe not issuing them so liberally security clearances, and then forcing the code of military justice, because what we're creating is something akin to the weaponization of the media, the foundations, the university, and now it's the high echhelons of the military. And it's very scary. And at least the left, in the sense that Joe Biden, how he interprets that, it's on record how he interpreted it. And when you have people like Eric Kleinsmith that Molly referenced earlier in bad French grammar saying "Vive la résistance," you can see that, and the coup continues, and the coup that was Mark Zaid said that, a lawyer to Mr. Vindman. So it's normalizing something that's quite dangerous. And Donald Trump was a test case. He was the first person without military or political experience. He was very controversial, and he said to the country, will your institutions withstand something that you're not familiar with? And so far the answer is maybe.